What's up, Cradle fans? I need to put out a video. I need to do a Bloodline video. I need to let y'all know what I think about Bloodline. So that's what I'm doing right now. I haven't done a video in a while, and Remixed isn't here with me, so there's a lot to talk about. Remixed is moving to Germany. He still wants to do the podcast, so we're going to still do the podcast. I'm going to interview people by myself, unless he can be a part of it. But the podcast won't die. I recently started a new job. Got that figured out from a time perspective. But it is it's June 11th, 2021. Bloodline has been out for 2 months now. The spoiler period is over. So I don't have to put spoiler tags on this. All right. I do this kind of a video with every single book. So if you're new here, I've done it with Uncrowned, Winter Steel, and now Bloodline. I didn't make videos before that, and I didn't do these kind of videos before that. So I'm going to be reviewing my thoughts on the book as a whole and throw out some theories or some concepts that we should be talking about, in my opinion. That's what the scope of this video is, okay? I wanted to do it sooner, but I wanted to distance myself from, one, the fan reactions beyond myself, and two, I wanted some time to digest the book and think about things. So let's get into that right now. Okay, cool. So you should be able to see my face, but also see my screen. All right, let's talk about the fandom response. So the average review right now, chilling on Amazon, I think is 4.7 out of 5. I just looked. I'm on Amazon right now. 4.7 out of 5. And that's kind of what Will and his team expected. How do I know this? Because on book launch, an alpha reader who lies to the fandom all the time was in Discord talking about that, how they kind of expected a 4.7 out of 5 because the content of this book is a little bit more challenging to consume, if that makes sense. It will. I hope it will after I explain it. But it is a little more challenging to consume. It's not as straightforward, and our character isn't spending the entire time getting stronger and beating up the bad guys, which is basically what he did in Winter Steel, and so many of us love that. Well, this book was not that. Despite it not being that, it still hit the freaking New York Times bestsellers list. And I did not think that this was possible for an indie author. So what ended up happening, based on my sleuth deductions, is that Will White has an exclusive partnership deal with both Amazon and, because of Amazon, Audible. Amazon sales are counted towards the New York Times bestsellers list. However, for the actual hardback or whatever, they take in data from all over the country, all over the world. If your book is sold, mainly all over the country. If your book is sold in stores, that's counted. If it's sold online, it's counted. But it's a combination of the two. If basically all your book sales are digital and a couple, paperbacks, you're pretty much you don't have a chance. You have no chance. But they have an audio category now. And what's the biggest audiobook provider on the planet? Audible. And Will has an exclusive deal with them. So Audible sends their sales data to the New York Times. And voila, we now have an indie author that is a New York Times best-selling author. And I think it's great that it's Bloodline. I think it's great if it's Bloodline. If it was Winter Steel, okay, fine. But the fact that it was Bloodline, a book that isn't purely about progression of, like, in a cultivation sense, I find that personally amusing. And it makes me feel really good inside for reasons I'm not going to tell you about. But what I am going to tell you about are all my thoughts on the book. So let's get into that. So this is how the book went with regards to my memory and how I kind of think about things. These are the sections of the book. So I'm just going to go down this list. I'm going to comment. It's going to be stream of consciousness. This is not going to be a super structured video. I said that at the beginning, I think. Whatever. We're hanging out. We're having a good time. And we're talking about Cradle. So it doesn't need to be structured. So the book starts off. It's a short but intense prologue with Ozriel. She is actively fighting the Vroshir and the Silver Lords on multiple fronts at once. And so, as we see with Dross later in the book, it is really hard to split your consciousness multiple ways and have multiple things happening at once. It's very taxing from a willpower perspective and from an authority perspective. Ozriel has to focus. And it ends up being kind of a, oh shit, this isn't going to be easy type of situation where, yeah, a judge might be able to save an iteration. But if a single judge can't save multiple iterations because of the power of the enemy attacking, that's not good. And the fact that I think it was one of the Machiels chased the Silver Lords and died because he was chasing the Silver Lords until the point where they could swarm him. That's intense. That means that there are enemies out there that are confirmed to be, on average, extremely powerful. And it creates cannon fodder and enemies for future novels. So I like that. But it was intense because it set the tone for the book. Like, shit. I mean, Lindon is trying to get strong enough to even matter in this, like, multiverse war. But even, like, the strongest tier, good guy. And I use that term good guy pretty loosely because we could argue if the Abidan are a benevolent force for good, considering that they leave billions and trillions of people to die all the time. We're not going to get into that. But for all intents and purposes at this point in the series, they are our intergalactic, bodyguards that we're rooting for. And they are getting their asses kicked. So I forgot to put a couple things in here. So I'm going to weave it in. I didn't really weave in the whole Darumon Executor concept in here yet, but I promise to talk about it. So we see that Furiel is getting her butt kicked, and that's foreboding. Then we find out that Fury is being forced to ascend, which is good for him. I mean, honestly, he wants to go fight, and holy shit, is he going to have a fight on his hands. We saw that he left Cradle and went to Threshold. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. The bullet point 5 is the Ascension event. But whenever I saw that Fury was ascending, I was like, holy shit. I really hope that his final battle was what was worth it. And so during the Ascension event, we learned that he does kill Zorus. And we find out later that he crippled the shit out of a bunch of the cults, especially the Abyssal Palace. He wounded the Abyssal Palace so bad that they couldn't jack with Northstrider and come to defend the Wandering Titan when Northstrider and Malice were fighting. Anyway, so that was actually pretty interesting that a brand new monarch was able to kill a herald, fight off several other heralds, including a sage, and then just disrupt the palaces and everything. I mean, can you imagine how good of a warrior Fury must have been if Northstrider is commenting that a single Abyssal Palace, the Abyssal Palace, was able to have weapons and artists enough to give him issue? If a new monarch's able to jack that up, kill a herald, jack other stuff up, that's impressive. So I'm personally happy that Fury is able to ascend and go take his skills out into the multiverse. All right. So that was interesting. Then we have the family home, which could be confusing considering what ends up happening in the book. But I'm talking about the floating fortress of both Yeren and Lindon, which I think is really cool. They now have a base of operations that they can take wherever they go. And I thought it was cool that a sage can't just teleport in. And I thought it was hilarious that Lindon knows that Eithan will eventually be able to teleport. Personally, I thought that Eithan was able to already teleport along his Madra web, but I was wrong, as I often am. So I thought that was cool. At this point in the book, it's like the rising, like we're still collecting ourselves from the craziness from Wintersteel. The Akuras are still trying to like consolidate their power, deal with some things. The trial ends up happening. Pride is still suffering from PTSD, according to Mercy. And it's just, we're waiting for the events of the book to unfold. So this is, in some respects, I like this part of the book because it's relaxing and you can just enjoy what's happening. Which brings me to the trial, where Mercy's put in charge of the trial. And we learn that a monarch can fuck with a soul oath. So Seijin Daji makes a soul oath and then just lies. It ends up not affecting him at all. And that's intense. I don't really know what that means for the grander scheme of things. I don't know how that's going to play into other events. But that is now a means of interrogation that can't work anymore. I also find it really interesting that at this point, almost everyone knows it was Raygon Shen. But for whatever reason, Raygon Shen put in a lot of effort to ensure that Seishin Daji can't, like, call him out. I don't know if I'm getting tinfoil hatty, but I feel like that means something. I feel like that means something, whatever it is. So we have the trial event where Lindon beats the shit out of Daji. And we know it's going to happen, but it is kind of a nice defining moment where Lindon doesn't use any weapons, barely uses any techniques, and just wipes the floor with another Underlord. That was cool. I liked it. Also liked that was the sneak preview, considering it didn't really spoil anything and it hyped the fans up. So that we leave the trial, and I just want to call something out here. There has been a lot of people complaining that there's a lack of character progression, or that Lindon is acting out of character in this book, and I find that to be absolute horseshit. Just totally wrong. I'm sorry if you feel that way, but you're wrong. I'm not saying you should feel wrong, but you're wrong. There is character progression. I mean, the fact that like Dross and Lindon have an internal dialogue about the way that they think about the ethics of how they treated Daji, and how Lindon's saying, I'm not Mercy. Like, I'm not going to show him mercy and kill him here. He needs to go and serve his time in the Akura torture dungeons or whatever happens. That was interesting to me. It shows a level of hardness on Lindon that hadn't really existed before. But my God, did it take a lot for a single individual to screw Lindon over enough times. And not just Lindon, but the people he cares about. I don't think Lindon cared that Daji kept trying to screw him over. He cared that Daji almost got his friends killed. That was, I think, the final straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. And that's really interesting. That's a start of character progression in this book. The events that happen to Lindon are affecting him, they're changing him, and he's growing from them. That's character progression. And it's going to keep happening in this book, whether you like it or not, whether the events make you uncomfortable or not, because we're about to start getting into that stuff. All right. The Ascension event. This was a little bit underwhelming to me. I do not think this is how normal Ascension goes. I think this is how a shepherded, forced Ascension happens. I made a video about heralds. Why are there so few of them? because there's a balance that exists on the planet where the Abidan force heralds, and now we know monarchs, to ascend to keep the balance from being disrupted. This is what that was. This wasn't like someone discovering how to ascend and then ascending. This was the Abidan assisting a monarch in ascending to a specific place so they could be recruited and they can join the ranks and go off to war. So we saw Fury bring his family, and we saw him ascend to Threshold. If I had to guess, I would guess that Threshold is kind of a meeting place for people who ascend in Sector 11. They go there, they get trained up to be Abidan, and then they're assigned a division, and then they go from there. Okay, they might get sent to Sanctum eventually, but we know that they were sent to Threshold. I think that Threshold is in Sector 11, which means Fury is now on the front lines of the war at the end of the book. That kind of warms my heart a little bit, because we know monarchs are stronger than most like low-level Abidan. I can't say most, but we know that there's a couple tiers of Abidan that monarchs are stronger than. It makes me feel good knowing that Goku, Furious Goku, is out there defending the universe. What else with the Ascension event? We saw some character type stuff with Mercy being embarrassed of her family. I don't know. I can't remember if she was embarrassed of her family or if she just called out that that's what happens. But Yeren and Lindon don't like it. Mercy doesn't really like it. And so on and so forth. I did find it interesting that we learned that Fury has other children, and that he brought them all with him. And he spoke of his wife in a way that made me feel like she was the only one, so that basically all of Charity's family, like direct family, is now gone, because Fury's Charity's father, and Fury's wife is probably Charity's mother, and now they're all gone. I mean, they've all been alive for hundreds of years, so at this point it's probably not a big deal, but who knows. Still pretty interesting. Still put some pressure on Mercy, which that pressure is applied later on in the book, and we see Mercy make some decisions that end up leading her to risk her life in the best way, and I'll get to it in the final boss battle. All right, so the Ascension event ends. Fury's now gone, off fighting the Guardians of the Galaxy. He's now part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And now we have a situation in which Lindon and company are going to return to Sky's Edge and head to Sacred Valley. This was interesting because this is the first time we see a new Dread God point of view. It's also interesting because we now see Charity using a Monarch's anchor to create a portal for a bunch of ships to fly through. Super expensive, which shows you how much they value Lindon. We also saw that Lindon can now sense willpower in others. He can sense the focus of willpower. He also saw that there's a big gap between a new sage and a centuries-old sage, whereas Charity was able to do things and manipulate reality in a way that Lindon could barely even follow. That might have to do with the fact that he's an under-sage at this point. Even so, he has a lot of cultivation growth to go through in the future. All right, we go through the portal. Now we have this line of ships banking in the sky. We have a super mega predator in the Wandering Titan. He's not paying attention, and he still knocks a ship down just from cycling his Madra. That's how intense and powerful this being is, and that just cycling his Madra without a veil is enough pressure to take out one of the ships, with Charity acting as like a defense. That was intense. Kind of stressed me out a little bit, not gonna lie, and created like the inciting stress event that made reading all of the Sacred Valley stuff pretty stressful. And I'm gonna comment on this a few times, and I think I mentioned it in the Bloodline birthday video, but the reason why the pacing felt weird was because you know what? I'm going to wait a second and get into it when we arrive at Sacred Valley. But the pacing was weird because of the stress involved with like a timeline of a nuclear weapon coming. You know, so you're like, get the fuck out of there, go, 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 and it just feels too slow because Sacred Valley people suck. And I'll explain that in a second. My take on that in a second. All right, return to Sky's Edge. We then have a fun moment when we're away from the Dread God, but not yet to Sacred Valley, where we get to see Yaren stretch her abilities a little bit. They go to have a little challenge on who can kill the evil sacred beasts, and Yaren just like wipes them all out basically in one attack, and she shows off a little bit. But we also get to see some cute little fun humor between the group. Personally, one of my favorite engagements in the whole book was when Lindon's trying to tell everyone about his modified and personalized scripts. Nobody gives a shit except for Zeal, who uses scripts as like the core part of his path. He cares. And I thought that was just a great Lindon and Zeal moment. I know probably most of you agree. So that was cool. And then we get to Sacred Valley. Now, I didn't know what to expect. I was not on the train that Lindon should just like wipe everyone out. Like to just wipe out the Heaven's Glory. It's not who he is. He doesn't just create wanton death for no reason. He's above the base emotions of just like rage wasting everybody. So I'm glad that didn't happen, because Lindon's more mature than that. He's better than that. And the whole point of like his team dynamic is to a rising tide raises all ships, especially in their team. They want better for the world. So wiping out a bunch of Jades, not a good look, which they don't end up doing with the Heaven's Glory sect or school. So they get there. Couple interesting things. One, the treasure room is full of trash, which I think is such a human thing to experience. I don't know, I can't speak for anyone else, but I remember going back to my elementary school or my middle school and feeling like a giant. And I never felt like that while I was there, obviously. I felt like these schools were huge. But going back to visit, I mean, it's tiny, like, because we grow. Our worldview expands. And so what used to be like our whole world is nothing. And that's what happens with Lindon. The first time he saw this treasure room was the first time he had seen these kinds of treasures in his life. At this point, those treasures are like the top of the food chain. And those of us as readers experience that from his perspective. So we look back and we remember all that awesome shit. Well, I love that the way Will approached this was Lindon goes in, starts to notice that some of this stuff isn't that great, but then Zeal, who is 100% aware of the quality of stuff in the world as being a former Arc Lord of the Dawnwing sect, he knows what quality is. He just points it all out. This is trash. And it makes sense that it would be in a place that suppresses aura and limits the sacred arts. So, liked that a lot. Then we have the reuniting with the family. And again, this is something that is impressive for a reader reading an author, that he's able to write this in such a relatable way. And I'm kind of getting at the point that I'm going to keep making about this book, in that we have our superheroes enter a place where they can't be superheroes, and they have to deal with their problems in like a normal, humane way, like a normal way, normal, mundane way. And that's very relatable. And that kind of sucks. That's like what not a lot of us are trying to get when we're reading these books. So we're looking for an escape. We're looking for someone to solve their problems with overwhelming force or overwhelming intellect or overwhelming wit. This doesn't happen in this book. Lindon rolls in with the respect of, 200 Akura golds, and he gets none from the people in Sacred Valley. because of perspective. Lindon's parents have only ever known the strongest people in the world to be jades. Okay? The strongest sacred artist they know is a giant fire turtle named Orthos, who is a jade fire turtle, who says that he was a gold. But again, they see, they sense, they experience. That shapes their worldview. Their worldview is very limited because of Sacred Valley. Lindon sees them. They know him from before. They doubt that he would be able to progress on his own because they never saw that from him. They never gave him a chance. They're ignorant. Their ignorance continues. The only person that really gets it is Kelsa, because she has experienced herself the knowledge that a true sacred artist can impart on you and help you improve. Orthos taught her how to use all 4 techniques, taught her how to, reset her iron foundation so she can get an iron body, taught her how to get to jade. She's experienced the realness of the sacred arts that nobody else has. So she can see how Lindon's so powerful, but his parents don't. And that brings back a lot of Lindon's trauma and insecurities from when he was younger. He goes off and he cries. I mean, that's pretty fucking real. And it's intense, and it's hard to read, and it's not what a lot of us signed up for. But we are better for it. The story will be better for it that it was written this way. I loved it. It sucked, but I loved it. And that's kind of the story with the rest of Sacred Valley. They split up, go their separate ways to try and just reach as many people as possible and get them evacuating. I found it hilarious that the only person that was able to get the job done quickly is the person that didn't give a fuck. Zeal goes to the Kazan clan, and the Kazan, they use Earth mattress, so they know something super intense and shitty is coming. They seem very practical. They're builders. They're not thinkers. They're not manipulators. They're not poison users. They're builders. They build things and they mine. So they seem like they're more practical, action-taking people. So when Zeal comes to them and kind of confirms the fears that they already had, they're on board. But it's hilarious that it's Zeal that goes to them and he doesn't give a shit. And they're like, sure, let's do this. I'm all about it. But everyone else had trouble. Lindon with his own clan. Eithan with Heaven's Glory, of all things. That is, you would think that of all people, Eithan should be the one to get the job done. Should be the one that is able to get the job done. But he doesn't. He fails. Mercy fails. Lindon and Yaren fail. In fact, Yaren fails so bad that she has to teleport out of there, go talk to Mommy Malice, and beg her monarch boon. And honestly, the Discord kind of figured out what her wish was probably going to be, because Winterseal talked up, you can't push your advancement too hard or you're going to jack your spirit up. Yaren does something that's literally never been done before. There's no way her spirit was going to be balanced. We saw how difficult it was for her in Sacred Valley. So for the monarchs to fix her sacred arts, it kind of feels like a cop-out, but it's also anchored in realism, with regards to realism being what we know about the magic system and the physics and stuff of the... Maybe not realism, but you get what I'm getting at. It does suck that she didn't get something super crazy and on top of things, but now she gets to be an Overlord Herald, in truth. That's cool. I like that. I'm about that. But man, Lindon... It's one of those things where he should have known. But again, his perspective when he was there was that they were protecting him, keeping him safe, never deceiving him, because they considered him as part of the clan, even though he was the ugly, redheaded, literally soulless stepchild in their minds. Then he comes back with power. They're not going to believe him. They're certainly not going to trust him. He didn't earn his power from within the clan. He probably isn't going to use his power to protect the clan. The clan is suspicious of everyone else, and all they know is illusions, deception, and backstabbing. Lindon's naivete was destroyed the moment that he ordered the first elder to walk to his death while carrying the destroyed soul and broken body of the patriarch. Lindon decapitated the head of his clan because they betrayed him. He was forced to do it. He almost watched the love of his life die at their hands. So that is going to change someone. And it was really frustrating the entire time. Everyone was trying to get the inhabitants of Sacred Valley to listen. They're not going to listen. The Jades are at the top of their respective food chains. They know no greater authority. There is a mythical gold, but they've never seen it. They've never heard it. None of their friends have ever achieved it. No one in their clan has. So they don't know what it means to be a gold in Sacred Valley. These super powerful sacred artists come from the outside. They're not going to listen to them, especially when these sacred artists that are stronger than them aren't forcing them to do anything. To these folks who have had to fight their way to the top, fight for all the land that they can keep, fight for everything that they've been able to achieve, and are taught that the other clans are enemies and that the other clans should serve their clan, because remember, in Unsold, all of the clans want to eventually be the one clan ruling them all. So, like, there's a dynamic there that's never going to capitulate to someone else unless they are forced to by overwhelming power. Mercy learns that lesson with the Lee clan. She learns that her mother operates in a certain way for a reason, because it's the most effective. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the only way to operate? No. Mercy's operated in her own way and been fine until she needs to accomplish an outcome that requires a specific cold-hearted output. And that's what she does. And she shudders for it. But she grows from it. And it leads to her to being able to fight a battle and put her life on the line for her friends in a way that she had never been able to do before. She had never been outclassed before the Uncrowned King tournament. And she had never put her life truly on the line and had to, like, overcome. And so she got crushed by Safara. Then she fought Safara and tried to defend her brother and failed. She failed again. Lindon came through, saved her ass, saved Pride, saved Eithan in a way. Not Mercy. So Mercy had to go help her friends because she has kept failing. So she stows away, joins the team, and then ends up having to act like her mother to accomplish the goal. But she accomplished the goal. The Lee clan will now continue on because of her. She grew from that, and we'll talk about how that affected her in the final battle. Okay, we've talked about a lot. I'm not going to cover Eithan and Heaven's Glory because he fails. Heaven's Glory sucks. Blah, 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 whatever. But I am going to go into Lindon's advancement. We're learning very quickly that Overlord is not that big of a deal for those with the right resources, the super stable foundation, the strong other attributes like strong spirit, deep core, strong lifeline, etc. We learn that Overlord's not a big deal. It's just a matter of becoming self-aware enough. And Lindon has become self-aware enough. So when Malice teleports them back, where did they end up going? Moongrave, I think. I think that's where Malice teleported them. Either way, Lindon prays to Suriel, and it's answered. Only because the Abidan is getting screwed. They're getting destroyed. And Suriel takes a moment to share some insight with her favored and clear some things up. And I thought this scene was so cool because we've come full circle. Lindon has accomplished what Suriel never thought he could. But he's not done yet. But he's kind of at a crossroads because he achieved his original goal. At this point, his goal has been mostly achieved. He has saved his family. His family's safe. They're in Moongrave. They're on the ship that he was on. They're good to go. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people have already evacuated the valley. He has, in like the barest sense of the word, succeeded. But then he learns a little bit about fate, and that fate is not a direct path, but it is a winding path of branches and decisions that can be predicted and guesstimated, but never purely known. And I thought it was really cool that Ozriel showed Lindon that Lindon had the agency to make a decision on what Lindon thought was right. And Lindon doesn't half-ass things, ever. So Lindon makes the decision. I'm going back. I don't want the Wandering Titan to completely destroy my home. I don't want the tens of thousands of people that might have a chance to get out die when I could do something about it. I don't know if I'm going to survive, but I'm making the decision, the choice, that this is the kind of sacred artist I want to be. The kind of sacred artist with the power to protect and defend his homeland. So, I mean, he already knew his revelation. He just couldn't do it in Sacred Valley. So he goes, he advances to Overlord, tops himself up on Soulfire, and then, like a badass, teleports across the world using a Monarch anchor that he placed, and now he's back in Sacred Valley, or he's back outside Sacred Valley. Now, I talk about character progression for everybody because we have a concept called an icon that is pretty important for progression. And it requires an important and impressive amount of character progression to so closely embody a concept that you reflect and manifest the icon so that you can then use the authority granted by that icon to manipulate reality. Lindon's already done it with the Void icon. So what do you think is going to happen now that tens of thousands of people see him come back, float up into the air, and like shoot a rainbow of lasers and kill only dread gods? Sorry, only dread beasts. He saved thousands of people. Jai Long, last thing he saw, wow, Lindon's really a sage. Clonks out. Thousands of people saw Lindon save their asses. And those thousands of people are probably going to gladly join his sect. At this point, he's been validated. He got them out. He was right. And now he just performed feats of sacred arts that they couldn't fathom. He's one of them to them now. They're refugees. He's one of them. He's from where they're from. He knows who they are. He'll protect them. So when the whole sect stuff comes up later, and he comes to their aid, that's awesome. Holy shit, this video is already 38 minutes long. I've been monologuing without basically any notes this whole time. So hope you're staying with me. All right. So Lindon returns, withdraws, of course, does his cool stuff, and he's preparing to engage, and then whoomp, here comes Yaren. And then, who do you think opened the portal back? Eithan did. How the fuck? How is Eithan so good with willpower, being a new Archlord? He knows more stuff. Archlord. He knows, again, too much stuff. Now, he doesn't do anything super crazy in this book, but he teaches Lindon how to use sage powers, as if he already knows or knew how. Like, I'm not saying that Eithan is a reincarnation of Ozriel. I'm not saying that. I'm kind of saying that Eithan probably picked up some sort of like a legacy from Ozriel, and so he just knows fucking everything he needs to do to get to Monarch and be dope. Like, If anyone had their path cleared completely, it was Eithan. Until Eithan screwed up and had his monarch get, killed. That kind of set his plans back a little bit. And it's probably what changed him a little bit to want to do teamwork. But yeah, he knows a ton of stuff that he probably shouldn't. A ton of stuff. So much stuff. Probably a legacy, which we learned about in the last book, that legacies exist. It's basically a bunch of memories in an ordered fashion that take you from 0 to 100 real quick. So I think that's what's going on with Eithan, because I think Ozriel's out there. And at this point, before I go into the final boss battle, I'm going to talk about Daruman, the Mad King, and the Executors. So, Ozriel has been preaching that the Abidan is wrong and that he's right and that he should be able to change things and that he should be able to intervene and save people irregardless of the Eldari Pact. And it doesn't matter because he's right. Well, now we know that the Abidan have tried to do that twice. First with the Executors, then with the Vroshir. The Executors were a massive failure. The only one that did any, was able to last a long time was Daruman. And he ends up having to, because of his, self-righteousness or whatever, take a class 1 Chaos Fiend into himself to contain it. And then he's immediately imprisoned, which is standard protocol, I'm sure. He breaks free. Turns his planet into a ship. And starts just being, multiverse enemy number 1. He works to create the Origin Shroud, which blocks your the origin of your existence so that you can't be tracked. So that as you move through the way, the ripples of your passing go undisturbed because there's no existence paired with your movements. You're completely shrouded. And yet somehow Daruman shows up right where Ozriel is. Ozriel wasn't expecting him because he says so in his recording that he left for Suriel. He ends up destroying Daruman's body. Daruman reforms himself up in the atmosphere, which is a concept that I'm going to talk about at the end. God, this video is going so long. Thank you for watching this far. Y'all are the greatest. Hope the content has been okay. Daruman reforms himself. Ozriel, short-term teleports, which is really interesting because Suriel wasn't willing to do that on this iteration. Now, the iteration at the time that Suriel was there was in a very, very mature state of corruption. It wasn't yet there when Ozriel did his little short wave teleportation, so whatever. Ozriel blinks over to Daruman, and like a fucking surgeon, just, clips the Origin Shroud off of Daruman, doesn't destroy it, and tells Daruman, you might be able to escape, but you can't leave with this. And so then Daruman yeets himself out of there. And then all of a sudden, Ozriel disappears. Can't be tracked. No one knows where he is. The spider Telariel, who's normally lazy, goes after him. Can't find him. Now, what would the most competent judge in many, many thousands of years, skilled in all forms of authority save for restoration, what would someone like that do with an invisibility cloak? They've got the Elder One and they've got the invisibility cloak. So they do whatever they want. They disappear. You can't track them. I have a feeling, and this is getting a little bit into tinfoil hat territory, that Ozriel is in Sector 11. I feel like he's in Sector 11. And I feel like Daruman and company are now about to back him into a corner and force him to reveal himself. which could be super interesting. I also, it's going to be I expect it will probably be funny that the Abidan, their most important sector, is now off limits to them. They try and fight their way through, and then suddenly, boom, Ozriel rips his way free with a bunch of badasses, Lindon and company in tow. This is probably a couple books down the line. And then, whatever happens, happens. But yeah, I think Ozriel's there. But I thought it was really interesting that we learned about the origin of existence and how you are able to separate your existence from your body. And then if your body is destroyed, you can reform it. But there's a limit, right? It's like your HP. If your body's destroyed, you can reform it, but it uses up some of your existence. I think this explains why Claudia, the Sage of a Thousand Eyes, looks old. We know that she got, splattered into, red mist and her spirit disappearing, but she's still alive. Okay, well, she used her authority over restoration to reform her body, and it apparently sapped a lot of her existence because now she looks old. Sages basically don't age. Charity has been a sage for, 150, 160 years. She looks like she's 20. The Sage of Red Faith looks ancient, but he's been a sage, for a very, very long time. Basically, with that being said, sages don't really age. So for Claudia to look so old, mainly for Eithan to comment on it in Wintersteel, it makes me feel like that's a thing. Like if you use the power of restoration to completely reform your body and spirit after it was just destroyed, it's got to sap your existence some. There's got to be some, like in The Alchemist, like an equivalent, the law of equivalent exchange. So I consider your existence to be like your HP, like your health pool, and it saps your health pool, but it makes you relatively invulnerable to like a one shot. So that's pretty cool. I also think that's how Northstrider was able to survive the Weeping Dragon. Everyone thought he was dead, but he wasn't. And the reason for him being alive is that we know he has the power or the authority of restoration. So he did it to himself. He doesn't look old. He did look scruffy in Wintersteel, and then in Bloodline he looks cleaned up. I don't know if that's related. Probably not. But I think that a monarch obviously has a much deeper origin of existence. I also think that the origin of existence is why the Dread Gods are unkillable, in that the Dread Gods have their existence anchored to either Subject 1 or the Labyrinth. And while Subject 1 is locked away, they can't die. So someone once asked Will if there were liches in Cradle, and he said yes. Or if there's a way that someone could become a lich, he said yes. Well, isn't that what the Dread Gods are? If their phylactery or their origin of their existence is somewhere else, can't kill them. Seems like it makes sense, but we'll find out next book. All right, I've kind of ranted a little bit. Gonna bring it back in, tighten it up, get close to wrapping this up. So we have the final boss battle, which is the culmination of everything Eithan has wanted to achieve with a team that's able to work together to achieve something that's greater than the sum of their parts. Dross, for the first time, does something I've been looking for a while, in that he's able to coordinate an attack plan with multiple people. Unfortunately, he ends up having to use a monarch basically level fox dream that wipes him out. But again, I think that the origin of his existence is tied to Lindon's existence, and thus Dross cannot die if Lindon is alive, which is why they're saying, well, spirits like him don't really die. which is true. Lindon still has Dross in the back of his skull, but no personality, no sentience. So who knows how that's going to end up working. We see Orthos move to Underlord and become, a big boy. So go Orthos. But we see Mercy sacrifice herself for her team. She's outside the zone. She's safe. But she says, you know what? Fuck this. I have failed my friends enough. It's time for me to sacrifice or put myself in danger, in mortal danger, for my friends. And she does. And thousands of people will have seen a large being in amethyst armor protecting them, fighting off a dread god. A lot of people will have seen Lindon fighting off a dread god. A lot of people will have seen Yeren fighting off a dread god. There are icons to be gained here. I don't know which icons for who, although I expect the shield icon is coming to a supporting character or a main character near you very soon, because everybody was seen protecting people. Lindon was protecting people. Yeren was protecting people. Anyway. Zeal. Zeal was able to finally do something that was able to affect a dread god in a way that was able to save people. That's probably going to heal some of his trauma. It's also probably going to bring him closer because he made a decision to help. That's cool. That's character progression. Pretty much all of our characters, save for Eithan, had some big moments in this book. I thought the book was great. I thought it was stressful as shit when everybody was trying to convince a bunch of scheming backstabbers who have never known a greater authority, and how none of them were using force. It was just so stressful because you knew, like, a nuclear warhead was about to fucking walk into a valley and kill everyone. So it's like one of those escort quests in World of Warcraft, or it's like one of those timed events. It's really hard, and any sort of like wasted time or like inefficient strategy is just gonna piss all of us off. That's what happened. That's what made that part so uncomfortable. It was too relatable. We didn't see our heroes use their super magic superpowers to do super magic super powerful things and solve the problem. They had to solve the problem through like grit and hard work and determination and some, social engineering. And it was stressful. The fact that Will was able to write that in a way that elicited that response is impressive. And I think that bodes well for the super awesome mega combat and mega cultivation and mega progression that's coming. All right, let's talk about the epilogue real quick so I can wrap this up before it becomes an hour. Is it an hour yet? Where's the timer? 53 minutes. Ugh. I'm not editing any of this, so it's going in. All right. When I read this book, I was looking out for Whisper the entire time. Whisper was one of my favorite characters. He's very mysterious. There's a lot of mystique around him. We never really knew how strong he was until Will confirmed it. I'm going to pretend just for me. He's the strongest active being in Sacred Valley before everyone shows up. Where is he? Lindon comments on his absence a few times. And then finally, Lindon finds him. And this tells me a lot about Whisper. Whisper didn't give a flying fat fuck about current day Sacred Valley residents. Whisper cares about subject 1, the Dread Gods, and about the Valley. He mentions that training a single technique was a way to counter the suppression field, which means that he was a part of some sort of program to help acclimate people to a suppression field. Yeah, so there's a lot more to him. I find it really interesting. I find it awesome that Lindon is able to see through his bullshit and call him out. And I hope we learn a lot more about Whisper. I really do. But without a doubt, non sequitur, my favorite part of this ending of this book was the sect of twin stars. Jai Chen, Jai Long, Eithan, and Sacred Valley refugees building a sect. Zeal has already been a sect leader. Eithan has a plot of land that flies around that can create pills and potions and herbs and all sorts of stuff to help a cultivation base. Eithan has the Aurelius Library. We have Lindon, a very talented soulsmith. Fisher Gesha could bring the Fishers, or her family specifically, to the sect of twin stars. She could be, old Fisher Gesha, the soulsmith teacher. We need a refiner. Who can be a refiner? I don't know. We need a scripter. Oh, we have Zeal. Cool. We now have a sect that I don't know if they're going to be a vassal of the Akura clan, but they're by far the most powerful. Well, I'm not going to say by far, but on paper, they are very strong. They've got an Aurelius Archlord, an Overherald, an Oversage, a semi-crippled but quickly healing Lord of some part of the Lord spectrum. He's probably going to be an Archlord after he heals in Zeal. Man, they've got a giant Sacred Beast Underlord, Fire Turtle, that will probably end up acting as like a sect guardian. They've got Jai Chen, who can do a bunch of crazy stuff, and especially when she gets stronger. I don't know. It's going to be awesome. I'm not really here for like the empire building, but a little bit of sect building, something that Lindon can leave behind, a little legacy, a bloodline. That's cool. That's cool. I don't hate it. I love it. I'm here for it. But my friends, as we come to the end of this video, the thing that I am most grateful for is that I didn't bet on this book. And I don't have to do a lost bet video. That's the best thing. All in all, love the book. Loved it for different reasons than Winter Steel. Great writing. Took us on a journey we weren't expecting, and some of us are a little bit salty over. You'll be fine. All in all, great book. Hope you enjoyed watching. If I teased something earlier in the video and never got to it, let me know in the comments so I can get to it later. But this video is so long overdue that I'm glad that at 58 minutes and 19 seconds, I can close this out and say thank you for watching. More to come. I hope you can tell I'm still super into it, and it will remain that way. Have a good one, everybody. Goodbye.